Hi, welcome. We are very glad to have you join us for this training on the site visit processes for ACATE. This video webinar is meant to provide you with an overview of the next steps you'll take in terms of your orientation training. I'm going to walk you through some information on three of the modules you'll do online, and also some brief information on a fourth module that you'll do at a later point. And if we haven't said this enough, I just want to take a moment to thank you for being an ACATE site visitor. This is a really interesting part of the process. I've been on about 8 site visits myself, and each one I learned something. It is always great to work with some other professionals that are involved in this project. It's been interesting to go and meet students at various art therapy programs and to see and experience some of the other programs. But mostly it's just a wonderful opportunity to feel like we're giving back to the profession and raising the bar on how we create quality and also innovation in our programs. So site visitors are an important part of that. And I hope that as we move through these trainings that you get a better and better sense of that. Now you will attend your first site visit with another visitor who's been on a few. So everything I tell you today, I'm creating this video so you can go back and review it and feel like you're really solid in getting the big picture, but not to worry. We will join you, we will help you, we will work alongside you and help you feel really confident in how all of this works. Any questions after this? As you know, find me. I am the coordinator for these efforts and work with the full council to try to make these processes we're developing as smoothly and seamlessly as possible. So before we begin, I want to ask you to make sure you have 3 materials in front of you and ready to access, both during this video and then also as you go back and do your reviews while you're doing the online modules. Now, in parts of this video, you're going to see me getting out of the full slide and just clicking on things. I'm using a app that I'm not sure how to stay in full slide plus click over. So just bear with me as I go back and forth. But the 3 things that I'd like to ask you to have downloaded are the following, and they are all available on the ACATE website. So I'll show you that in a moment, but it is the Site Visitors Handbook. So there is a whole handbook. We're going to take a quick look at this later. It's in written form. It tells you everything you need to know and more, probably. And also the standards. So the standards are the outline of the program design, the curriculum, the resources available, and the faculty expertise available to make sure that the program is supporting its students to meet those entry-level learning outcomes to be an entry-level art therapist. And the third document I'd like to ask you to have in front of you is this handbook. This is a self-study handbook that programs use when they're completing their self-study, really their period of about 7 months of self-study analysis, and then they spend another few months writing up their report. And so this handbook's available to them to answer a lot of their questions and to walk them through the steps of how all this works. I'm going to be referring to this a little bit in our training today as well. And as mentioned earlier, there are some pieces that this PowerPoint is meant to cover. And in addition, there's some things that you'll do on your own as a next step and other steps that we'll phase in as well. So after this, you watch this video, you're going to receive links to 3 of 4 modules that will further orient you to these processes. Module 1 is an overview of site evaluator roles and responsibilities. Module 2 is about information about the site visit itself. What happens? What are the steps? How long does it take? Module 3 takes a closer look at the education standards and how to interpret them and understand them so that you can be using your assessment skills in terms of program sufficiency and meeting them. And again, I'll speak more to that in a moment. And then Module 4, which you can't see that really well on this slideshow. It is one that we haven't developed yet, but we will, and it is about how you actually write up the report both during and within the week after your site visit, and some of the things you just need to know about for getting that report finished. Again, we'll wait to cover that material until closer to a site visit. I just think it's best if that's freshest in your mind. So, by way of review, there are 3 organizations that are mentioned in these processes, and all have websites. I've asked you to take a look at their websites before I sent you this video, and so I'll just click over to them. The first website is the main website for CAHEP, the accreditation organization we're working with. I will tell you all, I'll take this chance, these pictures that are on the main homepage of the CAHEP website, they keep asking us for a photo of art therapy students in action so they can put them on the website. And nobody's sent us a photo that we can use yet. We need to have permission and whatnot for that to occur. So if you have a photo and could get written permission from your students, we do have the form. We would love to have art therapy represented on their page, particularly because some of these photos on the CAHEP website might confuse art therapy students. Like, why are people wearing masks and standing over people on stretchers or whatnot? Some days it feels like that's what we do as art therapists. But there are a couple things on the CAHEP website I've asked you to review. Just to go back to them again now, want to invite you to pay attention to this accreditation link. There's a glossary of key terms and some things that can be helpful to you. This program director's link is very important. It's got this accreditation ABCs to help program directors really understand these processes, but they can also help you as well. So you see there's like an FAQ sheet, there's various topics that are addressed and whatnot. The second website is actually to go over to, well, let's do this first. Within the CAHEP website, you can find the subpage for the Accreditation Council for Art Therapy Education. Easiest way is just to type art therapy in the search term. You'll come to a CATES page. If you want to make a note of it, you can see the hyperlink up here. And on this page, the reason I wanted to make sure you know about it and know it exists is it can be really helpful to you, because on the right-hand side, as you scroll down, it will take you to the documents and handbooks and other materials that we've created that programs are actually using. So it can help you best learn our processes as well. And the third website to check out is actually go back to the ADA website. And if you click on, you can click on some things under the education link. We are trying to help potential students understand these years of transition. And, it's there's so many moving pieces that it can be difficult. But one of the things for you to maybe see and to know to refer people to is this page on selecting a master's program. We do try to explain that at this time during transition, that both EPAB approved programs and CAHEP accredited programs that are managed by a CATE are equally sufficient, both prepare students for that seamless pathway towards board certification. If you know of anybody that has a question about all of this, there is a link here to a brochure for students and potentially faculty to help them understand the changes that are occurring. And it will open in a moment. Yeah, so you can see here, and we do pass out this brochure at conferences and whatnot. And if the term EPAB isn't ringing a bell for you, let me just go back and clarify again, and this will be part of the online modules you'll be provided for your further training. EPAB stands for the Educational Programs Approval Board, and that is the group under, they are a subcommittee of ADA officially, and that's the group that has been managing and overseeing the approval of art therapy programs. That group is phasing away. When I write this video, I'm going to guess probably 2 more years in existence. As they phase away, programs are coming in and being accredited. So EPAB's work will end in a couple of years, but you'll hear that referred to and these transitions referred to in your online training modules. So let's get into the site visit itself, the purpose and role of the site visit. This is a very important, this is a very important part of the accreditation processes. And I'm sorry, I did not realize that as I click away, it actually takes me back to the beginning. But so I'll stop clicking away in a moment, but let me take back to this side. So the purpose of a site visit and the site visitors is really, it's a face-to-face, it's a boots on the ground way of going to a program and assessing with our eyes, with our ears, with the same assessment skills we would use with clients to gain a sense of the extent and degree of the program's compliance with the CAHEP education standards. Now, the site visitors do not make a final determination about that. Site visitors are really there to gather data, to gather impressions. There's a report that's written, provided back to ACATE, and ACATE then takes the information along with other reports the program submitted and makes its recommendation that goes over to the CAHEP board of directors. So it starts with what the program submits, goes over to the site visit team, back to ACATE, and then on back to CAHEP. And it's important for site visitors to know that when we talk about assessing a program's compliance, we're really looking for the degree to which they can demonstrate compliance with the standards. This isn't meant to be a pass-fail situation where we're playing gotcha and figuring out what they're doing or not doing, but gathering the information and the evidence, the data, the surveys, the reports they provide, and as I mentioned before, using our own assessment skills to determine whether they're meeting the standards in a sufficient way, which best allows students to have that guarantee that they're going to be adequately supported and resourced to meet their learning goals, and for employers and the public to know that those students then are sufficiently trained to be offering their skills and services in an entry-level capacity that really involves a level of quality and competence that we'd like to see happening. There's a lot that you will give as part of these processes. There's a lot of steps, a lot of things you'll need to become familiar with doing, but there's also a lot you will get in return. What you will give that your families may be wondering about is essentially 4 days of travel. So there's a day to get to the site, and that typically involves air travel. It doesn't necessarily have to, though. We do not seek to place site visitors on visits that are at programs that are in the same state where a person lives. The optics of that cannot look great, even if there's no bias or no competition involved. We want to make sure to keep things as clean as possible. So generally it's air flight to a host city or a program's host city. Sometimes then, depending on how far the airport is from the program, some travel there. The program arranges the hotel and the program arranges the air flights. So, but you work with them to figure out what time works for you. You get there the night before, you meet with your other site visitors and you collaborate on your thoughts and a kind of an approach for how you're going to stay organized over the next 2 days. There's then 2 days of the site visit. We'll take a look at the typical agenda for that in a moment. And then generally, the morning of the fourth day is return home. We have found it really creates a rush situation to try to get back home the evening of the third day, and whether or not there's even flights out of the host city that late is usually is not such a common thing to have available. So that evening of the second day is usually just a nice dinner, a time to relax with your shared site visitor, because the first evening there is collaborating with them to make the plan. The evening of the first full day of the visit is actually a work evening. You get to working on the report that you have to finish out somewhat before you leave the site. And so the second evening is a relaxation time. You will work with some amazing professionals in the field. I have nothing but respect for the people that are involved in this process, and it's a great opportunity to develop not just professional relationships, but also collegial friendships, and with people that are really committed and kind of have this shared goal of carrying our profession forward. And you'll get to see some beautiful places of the country, and sometimes get sun if you're like me, you're from the north. But you'll also get a sense of some of the unique qualities of various art therapy programs. Did you know that there is actually a program that is housed in an institution that has a full equine program and stables and wonderful horses? So you get to meet all kinds of things. We have met llamas, we have met horses, and some other, I'm trying to think, some other creatures, fish in the ponds on the institutions. But it's kind of a fun aspect of the site visit. But as I mentioned, most of all, you'll contribute to the growth of our profession. And we do this work, it's hard work. We do it with a lot of dedication. We do it having carefully chosen people that have the competency and some background and foundational knowledge to be thinking about what makes for quality art therapy education. Site visitors have been vetted carefully by us. So congratulations on being accepted for this role. And I would like to take the opportunity to talk about how ethics are woven into everything that we do. This work is very confidential, and so there are some strict guidelines we follow to make sure that the reports that we write, the notes we take, are carefully stored. And then once a recommendation is made to CAHEP, that those materials are deleted or stored long-term just within ACATE storage systems. We do not talk about what we discovered on site visits outside of confidential ACATE discussions. And we do not, ACATE does not even tell other people. Sometimes we get emails asking, is such and such a program in your processes? And we do not even share that. So our processes of review are really meant to be between us and the program. And site visitors are also held to that same high standard. Being a site visitor also entails having a cooperative attitude. There are times during a visit when two visitors may agree on something they have a sense of for the program, and times when they may not agree. We always go back to the standards. What does the standard say about that? But there is some measure sometimes of again applying those assessment skills and determining how much or to what extent the standards are being met, and there may not be agreement. So using the listening skills we know to use, where we both listen and offer clarity, is important. And a lot of flexibility is required because it is a lot of work in pretty much 2 days. But again, it's a really interesting work, and it just does take often the ability to have a lot to do in the matter of 2 days and just maintain a sense of humor and a sense of professionalism about it and flexibility with it. And then there's the importance of maintaining a highly analytical approach to all of this. As I mentioned earlier, we are always going back. What do the standards say? How much is the program sufficiently meeting the standards, and what's the evidence for that? We are not on visits to be thinking about our own point of view about what makes a program good or not, or to bring our own bias to that even, or to use that program's information for our own gain. It is strictly to have this kind of framework for quality and gaining a sense of the program, how much the program fits within that. And one of the training modules, so training module 1 will go over the expectations of what a site evaluator needs to be about, along with some things a site evaluator does. But you can hear me saying this is an important role, but one that's really infused with a sense of ethical practice and a trustworthiness to be part of this process. So then training module 2, which will also be provided, will review what a site visit is, what it isn't, and what goes on during a typical site visit. So again, and I just talked about this momentarily, prior to the visit, there's the preparation for travel. I didn't mention this earlier, but you will also be given access to the program's submitted materials and would be asked to read over them and review them. And there will also be a chart that you're provided and some notes you're provided from AK Council readers who also read the report. So they also share their sense from the reading itself of the materials, how much the program is in compliance. And they share their notes with you, and you're able to take those notes and be thinking about them while you're on the visit, even as you're bringing your own ears and eyes to the situation as well. So also prior to, you meet the evening before. You go into day 1 of the visit. There's a very formal opening meeting with a script that's read. The script is provided to you. You then collect any updated materials from the program director that might have been pulled together from the time they submitted their report to the time a site visit is scheduled, because sometimes that can be 4 months or so between those times. So there might be, say, new faculty that come on board would be just one example. So you get that faculty member's CV. You then conduct a series of interviews over the course of 2 days. We'll go into that a little more through this video, and your training module will go into that a bit. You're also, while you're on site, you are taking a look at some things on site that are some of which may have been provided in the written report the program provided, such as links to the program's website, but other things that nobody's seen yet. So an example of signed timesheet logs for internship. We don't look at every one of those. It's a sampling of them just to get a sense of the processes the program uses to make sure everything's happening in a effective way and a clear way. And so we'll ask for a sampling of documents, or maybe to be shown the way students' grades are stored, for example, by the program. And often that's online in this day and age. So typically it's been the administrative assistant sitting alongside us, and we just ask them to show us this or that. And they either go find the file or pull it up and let us take a look at some things. As you move through these times for data gathering and interviews, there is a report that you complete. I'll show you that in a moment, but that report is, it's in a template, so it's pretty straightforward to work on that, though there's some certain language we use and a certain way we do it. As the second day comes to a close, generally around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there is then a second very formal meeting. It's called the summation meeting. And at that meeting, again, a script is read that wraps things up. The site visitors share their impressions of potential, well, two things, I'm sorry, the strengths of the program that they see in evidence according to the ways the program is indeed meeting the standards and exceeding them. And the site visitors share any potential citations that they see occurring. It is possible for a program to be accredited with citations, but we want to be making sure they understand the areas that they may need to keep working on if they are granted accreditation. Site visitors wrap that up. As I mentioned, they typically go and have a nice relaxing dinner after, because it's pretty tiring. That's a packed 2 days. And then the next morning, return home. Within 1 week, site visitors are asked to finish out on the Google Doc their report. It's double checked with me as the coordinator just to make sure things are accurate according to the standards, not as a way to tell site visitors what they should be thinking or what their conclusions should be in terms of their assessments, but just really making sure to check for accuracy. And then we ask site visitors to submit receipts for reimbursement, and we are developing those processes. So those receipts, more on that at that point comes, but we want to get you reimbursed ASAP. So that's a lot, right? So how in the world is a site visitor supposed to keep track of all of this? Well, not to worry. As I mentioned, first off, somebody will be on a site visit with you who will be the team leader, who has done visits before, and you will be able to learn by observing and working with them. Also, as coordinator, I will be available to you. I will walk you through some steps that will happen as far as being scheduled for a visit, making travel arrangements, getting reimbursed, all those details when the time comes. So I am kind of like your one-stop shop to make sure you have a sense of how this works and any questions that come up for you. There is also a checklist for staying on track right in your site visitor report. So as you're working on it, the very front piece, the front page, is this page where you're just checking off, did this, did this, did this, did that. And then later in the report, you're filling out the charts in terms of your assessment. But that front piece really allows you to stay on track with making sure you're tending to all the things that need done. I mentioned that there's interviews, but there's also these more formal, there's an opening meeting and a summation meeting. An actual script is provided for you so that those are consistent across all programs. And generally, I'll just say this now, the opening meeting script just lays out what CAHEP is about, why site visitors are there to review according to the standards for art therapy, and that there is a due process aspect to all of this. We just kind of lay out the formality of these processes and the consistency of them within CAHEP guidelines, which are also overseen by CHIA, which is kind of a main accreditation organization in the nation that oversees accreditation processes happening in a quality way, consistent way, and an accurate way. And then that summation meeting, again, it's a script so that the ways a program is, so the ways the information is shared with the program in terms of their strengths or potential citations happens in a consistent way. And it also mentions a few things just for the program about what happens next after a site visit, so they have a sense of what to expect. And also an agenda is provided by the program. Now the program works with me and develops the agenda, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. So one of the things that is going to be really helpful to you, and before you go on a site visit, I recommend you either print out this handbook that's available for site evaluators, or if you're like me and you like to do everything online, make sure you've got it easy access so you can just pull it up and really have it there to answer a lot of your questions about a site visit. I am going to step away from this main screen and just pull that up. want to show you a few things. I'm not going to go into this like in a huge amount of detail, but I'm just introducing you to this handbook so you can read through it on your own time. You'll see from the table of contents that it is meant to begin with the why of a site visit, how people get selected, what their responsibilities are, the agenda that will occur, info on preparing the report, and then what happens after a site visit, expense reimbursement. And it's got examples of some forms that you'll see along the way. So, like there's some surveys then that get sent to the program after, just about ACATE processes and also about their experience of the site visit. So there's an example of the surveys here. So I'm just going to scroll through slow enough that I don't make you dizzy, but fast enough to hopefully just provide you with a visual of why this handbook's so important. You can see that it does go over something I mentioned earlier about the importance of being a site visitor. And really, I just want to invite you to think about something. Anybody listening to this video is part of a project that there are very few people across the world doing this kind of work. This occurred to me the other day that the ACATE Council is made up of, when it's a full council, 11 people. That means there are 11 people working with this level of dedication on art therapy accreditation, not just in your area, but across the world. And then ideally, with site evaluators, there will be maybe a pool of about 25 that we can pull from so that we can, find people whose schedules fit with when a program can take 2 days for a site visit. So think about that. You are a member of a team that's made up of maybe maximum about 30 people across the world doing this kind of work. And so I want to invite you to celebrate what you bring to it, and also to really anchor the importance of this work and the importance of the ethics of it within yourself as well. And we vetted you. We feel you can do the job well, and we look forward to working with you. There's some information in this handbook. You'll see some visuals that are also going to be on this video. Here's some just kind of prompts about the things that are done ahead of time. One of the things I'm going to go over and show you an example of a site visit report and kind of what you'll be reading through ahead of time. But there's information in here on how to read that report, because it is a lengthy report and there's charts that get submitted with it and other data. And so being able to read it for the big picture, and then to go back to the various areas of it and to know not just how to assess, but what to be assessing is really important. And so you'll see that there's some thoughts here within the handbook on how to approach all that reading. And then there's some things that walk you through what the activities will be, what the agenda or what the interviews will consist of. So you'll have interviews, and they're actually my favorite part. You talk with groups of students and the advisory committee and faculty and even the president of an institution. And these opportunities have been, as I mentioned, very interesting. You will get fed throughout, so all your food costs are reimbursed, and the program does provide snacks for you within the room where you're doing the bulk of your work. You might go to other rooms to interview people, but you have kind of a workstation set up by the program where you can be there with your materials spread out, confidential place. You can be talking with your team member. And so there's some things you're going to be doing and looking for while you're there. We'll circle back to that in a moment. And then some information in here on completing the report. Again, there will be a separate training provided for that. And here's myself and another site evaluator after a long second day. And enjoying a dinner at the harbor in one of the beautiful cities in this country. So it's a nice aspect of the visit. I've already introduced you to ACATE Council as a whole, and this handbook does provide some information on what the council then does with your report afterwards. And it's got some brief information on the reimbursement process. We're still working those out. Now, if it's helpful to you, here's another checklist just so you can be preparing for your trip when the time comes. Some people find checklists very helpful to stay on track. So we're trying to provide you with information to help you do that without too much information, though. There's a lot here. And then towards the end of this handbook, there are some sample things to look at that are, as I mentioned, materials or forms that a program might be provided. So, for example, this logistics form, myself and the program fill it out and get it to you before you head on out to the airport for your visit. So you have in one place everything you need, everybody's phone numbers, where they're going to be putting you up, about how long it takes to get from the airport to the hotel, how they want to get you there, if they're going to pick you up or if they want you just to take Uber or a cab, and other things as well. And we do ask you if you have any dietary needs as well, because they're going to have snacks available during the day. And so, yeah, this is a handbook. It's really important. Enjoy it, read it. You might need to take it in stages. It's a lot there, but it's really meant to be very helpful to you. So let me just, I'm going to, play from the current slide. Let me see how that might work. Yes, so I figured out that earlier process. So this is just an example of an agenda for 2 days. And you'll see that things start generally about 8 in the morning, pretty early. You'll notice there's some meetings, tour of the facilities. There are 2 or 2.5 hour blocks of time that we call data collection blocks. And those are times when you can be requesting specific information from the program director or their administrative assistant, taking time to do things like look on websites, going through files that might be provided. And there's several blocks of time like that available. And those are blocks when you would also be completing the report template as well. Again, you don't need to have that 100% polished up at the end of 2 days, but it's straightforward enough. You can get the bulk of it done, and there's just clarifications that happen once you return home, really in terms of wording to be consistent with our processes. And so there's meetings with site supervisors. Often they're brought in by phone or video conference. So some programs have been able to have them come and meet with the visitors in person, though generally they're back at work. Meetings with the program director and faculty, meetings with the advisory committee for the program. So an employer representative, an institution representative, a faculty rep, a student rep. The advisory committee is meant to be a way for the program to get a feedback loop from people, from stakeholders in the program. We don't have a consumer of art therapy on the advisory committee because that would be problematic confidentially, but we do have an employer required so that there can be a sense of somebody that has a sense of what the program graduates need to be about to really be providing effective service once they've graduated. You meet with current students, depending, some programs are 2 years, some are 3, so how many student meetings happen can vary, but those are always very interesting. And I will tell you, let me just go forward on that. Let me just say this now, the students, they don't always know what to expect when site evaluators are coming, and they want to, do well for their program, but they also know that this is really important, that their opinion is being asked as well, and their experience is being asked. And I always love their expression. We start, because they generally don't know us, and or at least I like to start by letting them know that we're art therapists also. Um, and, they just love that because they realize that there's art therapists out there coming to really hear their experience. And the students are generally very eager to talk to us and to share their thoughts and really feel a sense of gratitude that they're being asked. So there are some meetings with institutional representatives as well. I mentioned like the president or a chancellor, the provost, the dean. I do want to invite you to think about taking at least one outfit, maybe like a suit coat or something. Don't I don't want anybody to feel like I'm overstating that. I've just found that those tend to be more formal meetings because they are with higher administration in an institution. And it wraps up. So you see another block of time here. This is 2 days of site visits. So in this particular schedule, from like 1 to 3 of the second day is time to more data collection, review, or pull the report together in enough form to then we offer a courtesy meeting with the program director alone just to let them know initially some things that were found as well as some strengths, let them ask questions. And then there's the summation meeting where that formal script is read and the list of strengths is shared along with any potential citations are also shared. And at that summation meeting, it's the program director, but also maybe like the chair of their department and faculty. So that's why we meet with the program director first, just because even if they have nothing that's problematic and just strengths, understandably, there's some level of understandable and very typical anxiety about what's going to be shared at that summation meeting. So we take that time to speak with them beforehand. So a site visitor, we use our, what I'm going to do is just walk through again information that's in the handbook, but just to try to make it visual here. We use our eyes, we use our ears, we use our assessment skills. I like to call it our belly eye, our gut, the physical feel of what it's like to be in a place and to gain a sense of what the student experience is like and the faculty experience. So we look for consistency. When we are on site as site evaluators, we're looking at the program's website and going back through and looking at the handbooks that they provided and some syllabi and some like the contracts they have with internship sites. And we might look at some student files, their files kept from the time they enter the program or maybe even application materials on through, looking for consistency of all of this. So the big question here is what the program says they are there to do and doing, is that consistent across the range of the program? So does the website create an accurate picture of this program? Does that fit with some of the other materials they provide? We also, as I mentioned, take time during a site visit to look for what's new since their initial report submission. There might have been 4 or 5 months gap. Sometimes longer. And so we need to collect new information and we're trying to get a sense of, is there anything in specific that's new that ACATE has never had a chance to read? So the ACATE readers have read the report that might have been submitted 4 or 5 months prior. So what do the site visitors need to be paying attention to that might be new, that they can pay attention to and be helpful to ACATE with these updates. And this is important for me to tell you. In short, a program is evaluated for accreditation as it exists at the time of a site visit. So that's where whatever was happening at that time in terms of who the faculty are, how the program is designed, the internship sites they have, the Are there processes in place? What's happening when the site visitors are on site? That's the picture of the program that we are then assessing and using for our final recommendation to KHEP. Now, it is possible, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to this, that after the site visit, what happens is the programs will get you'll submit your report to a CATE. The CATE then sends the program a findings letter. Sometimes in that findings letter, it mentions some things that the program needs to provide to us. So, for example, if a program has some syllabi that weren't designed with the aspects that are needed for to meet the KHEP standards, then the program that's listed in the findings letter. The program has an opportunity to submit updated syllabi. If there may be some things that they simply cannot complete before a CATE makes its recommendation, for example, let's say that they want to and need to be bringing an additional faculty member on. Maybe they're not sufficiently resourced in terms of faculty. Then that would they wouldn't be able to provide that as finished when they respond to this findings letter. And so they could be accredited, but with an action plan for a progress report, generally about 6 months out after being accredited, an update at that point if more time is needed, another 6 months before another progress report. But it is a give and take process, an opportunity to continue to update a CATE on how the program's doing. And let me just say, accreditation, I've said this in many ways, it's like joining a club. It is not, oh, now we're accredited, we're done. It's we're accredited. What that means is we've now committed to an annual process of continuous quality review. And every year then a program submits to a CATE an annual report that's meant to show how they're continuing to look at the program and its sufficiency in getting students to their learning outcomes and being properly resourced. So it's really a commitment rather than like a test where you've done it or not. Site visitors also are looking for what's attached to specific names, and I mentioned this earlier, things like signed internship logs for hours or tracking mechanisms the program uses to track student grades and progress across the program, things that would not be appropriate to be submitting to a CATE online as part of a report because it's just kind of that extra level of confidentiality. I do want to assure you, according to FERPA, so the Family Educational Rights Privacy Act, which applies to education programs, any information that's part of accreditation processes on individual students or faculty can be provided, but as I'm mentioning, we try to, anything that's like got specific names on it, we prefer to do that on site. So the site visitors are a part of that. And then the site visitors do a lot of observing. They get a tour of the program facilities, the art studios, classrooms. If online learning is occurring, if there's some online classes, they're given a little, generally by the IT people, a walkthrough of what the online teaching is like, and anything else that there is there to put eyes on the situation. And as I mentioned, we sometimes, as part of the tour, we get to meet llamas and horses and things like that. But we've seen some just being on site and getting a feel for what the spaces are like, the studio spaces are like, really gives a feel for the program itself. It's kind of like what therapists do. We're meeting with people, we're talking with them, we're engaging with them and getting all of that communication that happens that's beyond words on a page. And it's been a really rich part of the site visits. So, as I've mentioned, we are there to listen and assess, really like a therapist, not to play gotcha, like to try to catch programs where they didn't do this or that, but to assess in a way where we have a sense of how effective things are in terms of how they're occurring. And then in a lot of the interviews that we do, we rely on how questions. Those tend to be, that whole open versus closed question approach that we use with clients. So how questions allow us to get a sense of how processes are working. I do want to pull something up in the self-study handbook. So, oops, you know what? I hope I didn't. Okay. Oh no, my computer is taking over. Oh no, it's doing an update right in the middle of this. Hold on, let me get out of here. Ah, oh my goodness. It's bound to happen when we're using our laptops, right? So I'm sorry, I already clicked away from the site visitor handbook. I do want to go back to that for sure. Nope, I didn't. Here it is. So I'm going to go back to some pages. I'm sorry, don't look. I'll tell you when I'm done. I don't want to make you dizzy. I'm going to scroll to pages toward the end. Yes. Okay. So it's in Appendix G, and it is some questions that you can consider asking during some of these interviews. You don't need to, but these are meant to be guiding questions to give you a sense of the kinds of questions that might give you the information we're looking for during a site visit. So we do ask that before they go on a visit, site visitors review these questions, and just to get a sense of how they might want to approach the interview process. And I also want to show you something. Here, let me get out of that. You will also be provided, as some of the information you get prior to a visit, some little things that might help you stay organized during a visit. This is my system. It's actually some specific pages from the handbook printed out with blank pages in between. So what I've done is, so if we just use this page as an example, when I go into that meeting with the school administrators, I've got, so all of this is just stapled together. So I take this page, I tear it out, I've got it sitting there, and then I've got the blank sheet right next to it. So while during the interview, I can be like glancing down, just brainstorming what questions might be available, and then on jotting down my notes by hand on the right hand side. I found that system works for me. You might have your own system, but wanted you to know that these kinds of materials are provided to you and exist. Okay, so let me go back to this PowerPoint and keep going here. We'll play from the start again. Oh, it wasn't from the start. I should have played it from the current slide. Okay, hang tight. We're going to click through here. This gives you a chance to go back through. And again, everything I'm going over is in the online modules and in these handbooks you'll be provided. I'm just giving you the big picture. So when you read this stuff, it's comes up off the page for you a little bit better than just looking at words. Okay. I mentioned earlier that during that summation meeting, we share the perceived strengths of the program with a program. And it's important that you know something. When we assess for strengths, we're not doing that in a way where we're just assessing based on what I personally think makes a quality program. I've got opinions about that, but that's not what we're there to do, not what I'm there to do when I'm on a visit. I am assessing this program based on its strengths and effectiveness in meeting the standards and maybe exceeding the standards in some areas. So, and this is in the materials provided to you, but I'm going to look at the sequencing of the curriculum, for example, and the rationale for how it's sequenced. And does the program do an exceptionally excellent job at sequencing in a way that carries students forward? There might be some program policies that are just clearly stated and really accessible to students so they understand them. Maybe some things about resources available to the program, which allow them to meet the needs of whatever their cohort size is. It might be something in terms of the kinds of spaces available for learning or the kinds of studios available. Even the program philosophy and the goals of the program. It's linked to connecting to the institution of the mission itself and really being a program that has both a quality in terms of meeting the standards, but also a spirit of innovation and uniqueness as well to meet the particular flavor of the institution it's a part of and the kinds of students it draws. So just this aspect of assessing for strengths is a really interesting part of it. And as site evaluators, our role is to clarify and verify the information submitted by the program in its self-study report, not to make a recommendation because a CATE makes the recommendation over to CAHAP, but the site evaluators are those boots on the ground people to provide further information to a CATE so that we can make with accurate information so we can make a fair and responsible decision concerning the program. So everything goes back to what do the standards say? So the standards, we're just going to take a quick look at them. A lot more information about the standards will occur in this module 4 that's going to be created for you. The CAHAP standards and guidelines for the accreditation of educational programs in art therapy. They have an opening preamble. There are then 5 areas and then 2 appendices. And I'm just going to click away and pull up the standards real quickly here. It is going to be important that you become very familiar with these standards. Now, I want to let you know some of the things you will fill out. Take these standards and literally break them down for you. You know what, I'm just going to show you an example of what I mean by that. So here that I'm pulling up is the template for the report that you would complete with your team member while you're on site. And some of this I fill out beforehand in terms of the degrees and the name of the program and whatnot. Here's that checklist I mentioned earlier where you go through and just when you get something done, a certain kind of meeting or like the tour of the facilities, certain kinds of documentation that you're going to review, at least on a sampling basis, you check it off. So that keeps you on track. There's that script that you read at the opening. And then here's the list of all the generally possibly new things that might have been developed since the program submitted its report before the time of the site visit. If something has not changed, you just put NA in this area. So were there any significant changes in terms of the way the program, its advertising or its admissions processes, examples of like that. Not small changes, but significant changes that would change how things were described in the report. But here's what I wanted to pull up for you. Look at this. This literally takes the standards. So over here, the standards. Here's the report, and we break down the standards into section by section by section by section. And so you are able to work through them, make small notes on whether you feel that that section of the standard is met sufficiently or not, what evidence gives you that sense. It could be just, you say, interviews with administrators. You don't need to, this is not going into all the details. It's just interviews with administrators, review of self-study report. If something is not met, you then make a note in this final column. Okay, so it literally walks you through the standards section by section by section. So when I say to you, let me jump back over here. When I say to you that you need to become familiar with the standards, I also want to emphasize that we do walk you through them in a variety of ways, but do become familiar with them. And I'm going to speak more to that in just a moment. Just wanted to show you these things. So it goes through, as I mentioned, I'm sorry, let me go back. So the standards start with like the accreditation of the institution, and does the institution support the art therapy program. The standards take a look at the ways the program has goals for the program, and then goes into the resources available to the program. That's both in terms of classroom space, library resources, finances, administrative support, uh, internship sites, equipment that might be available. When we say equipment in art therapy, we're generally talking about, access to studio art making spaces. Remember that CAHIP has a lot of medical professions in it, so they're more thinking like medical equipment. But equipment, there's not a requirement a program have access to a kiln, but those sorts of things. What are the equipment that is available and art making supports that are available? Personnel, there needs to be a program director, and that program director needs to have a fairly clearly defined role and certain credentials. Same for art therapy faculty, same for related professions faculty, and site supervisors. The curriculum, I'll circle back to that in a minute, but a curriculum needs to be, of a planned sequence and meeting all the content and competency areas that are considered essential for entry-level education in art therapy. There needs to be assessment processes of how students are being assessed. And then outcomes assessment is a big part of the standards, because as I mentioned, this is really like making a commitment to every year be collecting data on the outcomes. How are our recent graduates doing? And what are employers saying about that in terms of the skills that they seem to be having? And so processes for assessment of students and the outcomes as well of students and graduates. And then there's a section on fair practices, making sure that everybody's being treated fairly in non-discriminatory ways and with certain safeguards. Then there's a section, Appendix A, in these standards. You can pretty much ignore that. Appendix A is just the due process steps a program can follow with CAHIP, should they have any concerns. Certainly read through it, but a lot of that is not to our concern. Appendix B is an important area to become familiar with. Appendix B was developed just by art therapists. So the main part of the standards is kind of follows a template CAHIP has for all its professions. Appendix B was developed by a task force of art therapists, and it goes through some of the what we used to call prerequisites. We can't call them that anymore, but some of that foundational learning that needs to occur either at the very beginning of graduate school or as prerequisites before. Most programs are just making that prereqs because they don't want to make their grad program longer than it already is. And then there's all these areas that are content required to be covered in the program. So what teachers must teach about. Some areas must be taught by people that are credentialed art therapists, not all of these areas. And then you'll see there's certain knowledge, skills, and attitudes, really effective behaviors that entry-level art therapists have gained competencies in. And so these content areas are broken down into these competencies, and the competencies are what students are able to know and do and value and be thinking about as they do their work at an entry-level basis. So this is all broken down, and Appendix B is a very important part of the standards, obviously. So want to ask you to become very familiar with Appendix B. The final part of Appendix B addresses, I'm going to just go clinical education experiences, so internships and some of what's considered sufficient training in that area as well. So back to the PowerPoint. If I'm going to play from the current slide. So yeah, become familiar with the standards. And again, though, we walk you through them. So that's a lot of information in the standards. How do you know if a program's like meeting the standards or not? Well, there's some things that are going to be very helpful to you. First of all, so I'm going to click away again. I'm going to go over to a handbook that programs are provided. So I've showed you a handbook that site visitors are provided, but programs themselves are also provided with this handbook when they're doing their self-study, generally about 8 months of analysis, and then as they're writing their report. And there's if you are not a program director, if you have not been living, eating, breathing this handbook, I want to encourage you to take a close look at it, because you'll get a sense of what the program's been up to as they've been going through these processes. And particular, and this is really important, so there's a list of all the extra documents they submit when they submit their report, charts and survey data and whatnot. Forms that they fill out and submit, that's all here. But starting on this page, so page 13 and on, what we do is we take the standards, and for any areas in the standards, so some of this stuff is worded, I'm just going to go back to the beginning. Some of it is worded in a way where it's like, what does that really like mean? Like, how would I know as a site evaluator if a program was meeting that area? Well, we're going to offer you some more training about that. But in this handbook, we also include the parts of the standards that we've been getting the most questions about. So you can literally see, here's what the standard says, and it's like an interpretation or a further explanation of that. So this is just an example. The standards mention a consortium. Now, this is, and it says it here, this is really not something, I don't know of a single art therapy program that's involved in a consortium. A consortium is more like what medical schools do, where they align with a hospital, and it's a shared teaching, officially a shared teaching thing. It's not just an internship site, it's a different kind of arrangement. So basically we say that here. So areas, again, that we get the most questions about the standards are explained here. Anything that's highlighted in yellow, just so you know, after we created this handbook, about a year later, we updated it in response to the kind of questions we get. Anything in yellow is the update. It's nothing new as far as policy, but we just might have worded things a little differently to be a little more helpful or clearer for programs. So that's why you see some yellow highlights here. So these pages are very important. These are the kind of questions you're probably going to get during a site visit, or the kind of questions you might have while you're reading over a program's report. So I really want to ask you to go through and look at these areas. So it goes from page 13 up through page, where does it end? Where does it end? Page 27. So a good 10 pages of explanations. Go through that. And then the last part of this handbook is some other explanations for program directors as they're pulling their report together. So you can, and some of the documents they pull together as evidence. So you can take a look at that, but wanted to draw those pages to your attention in particular. In case anyone's wondering, that's me, as you can see, and this is one of our CATE Council members, Melissa, who I just have to say, she's practicing in Utah, and during this site visit, where we're there the first evening after a long day, and we're working on our report there a bit, she mentioned that in that one day, she had been around more art therapists in one day than she had been for the last year, because there's not a lot of art therapists in Utah. I just thought that was very funny. Um, I also mentioned that programs submit a self-study report some months before the site visitors arrive on site. And you will also be given access to that and review it as well. And I'm just going to show you, I'm not going to get into the report itself, but this is an example of what you would be given access to, where within each one of these folders are the documents and materials that this program submitted, along with their entire then narrative report, all as a PDF. So you click through and you have access to the kinds of materials that can help you best understand the program. There is a template for the report they are writing, and so they are also working through the standards, explaining how they meet the areas of the standards, what evidence exists to show that, and if there's anything that they're working on or in processes of approving or improving, they mention that as well in the narrative. So you read that report as well. You have access to all those materials. You're going through, you're taking a look at all of them. And again, how do you know how whether or not a program is meeting the standards? It's really like making a collage. That's why I put that image there. So you're looking at materials the program submitted, things like survey results and charts that they provide, like a mapping of their curriculum. You're looking at the websites for the program and hyperlinks they provide, whether it's to their handbook or some of their policies. They provide handbooks, so they might have an internship handbook and a program handbook. Well, they really, every program does. And so you're given access to that. You're doing interviews while you're on site. And all of these things, you're putting them together to get your sense about the program. And one other thing that's going to be really helpful to you is that I mentioned that report that the program submitted. You are actually the fourth person that reads it. Before it comes to you, two ACATE readers have read it. And they have done two things when they've read it, and I also take a look at it as well. So they are following a chart that they get that's got the standards all broken down, and they also are, just based on the written material, giving a sense of whether the program seems as if it meets the standard or not. They then, at the very end of their chart, they leave some notes for the site visitors. And it's just like stuff to pay attention to while you're on site. These are some areas we don't quite have a sense of this, or we've got some concerns. Make sure to ask about this or look into this. So my point being, you get a lot of guidance while you're on a site about how to approach it. Having said that, your expertise and your ability to assess and to actually be on site is a huge part of our processes. And so we look forward to further working with you, to further training you. As I mentioned earlier, you will be provided a total of 4 training modules. 3 are coming your way. The 4th we are still working on. And that 4th one is about how you write your report, so it can wait anyway. What I would like to ask you to do is, first of all, thank you, go relax or something after listening to this long video. I appreciate your time. But now head on over to the links for the 3 training modules that you've been provided and complete them. Once you get into them, this is a little of how they'll look. You'll see there's an outline here of what you'll be working through. There's some written information. There's some little online, like, I'll call them tests, but they're like really a time for you to assess your learning. And you get multiple tries to do that. And some of these we're also adding videos into as well. So there might not be some videos in some of the ones you view, but for now, that is what it is. And enjoy that. And then when you're done with that, let me know you're finished. The person, one of the ACATE Council members, oversees those online modules. She'll be able to send me the confirmation that you've successfully worked through all of them, and then we'll take your training forward. Again, thank you so much for your time as a site evaluator. Looking forward to working with you and to giving you a chance to contribute all the great things you have to contribute and to really enjoy these processes, feeling like you have what you need to best understand them and to bring your expertise to them. Thanks again. So just give me a minute. It's going to take me a minute here to figure out how to get out of this video. Aha! Got it. Okay.